Hey everybody, welcome to Guidance Gossip, where my friend and I, Maria, go over just the trials and victories that we've had in life. We've had many things thrown our way, and we just feel like a lot of women could probably relate to our story. And what better way to learn than to get advice from somebody who's already been through it. So welcome.
Hi, everyone.
So we are just starting out today about how we were two broken women coming together, trying to figure out life. We went through overcoming toxic relationships, childhood trauma, into single parenting and co-parenting. And we actually moved in together and became like a household. It was my best friend and I, which is Maria, and we just moved in together and we figured it out together. So today we're just going to talk about how we met each other, how we first moved in, and just kind of let the story unfold. So
It kind of started out like I met Heather when she was 16. I was 17. I was already married. I'm pretty sure I didn't have Garrett yet. I was pregnant with her, I think. Anyhow, so she came up. She was out shooting with some friends of ours that lived down the road. She came up and it seemed like we had like a click right away. We were friends right away. It didn't matter how many times that we seen each other. We just picked up where we left off. So we've always had a really close bond. Um, Always called each other on the phone and talked to each other. And I think it was like 10 years or so we were in that kind of relationship with my husband and your husband. And we used to go camping together, and our kids kind of grew up together. So they all kind of knew each other. We were just family. Um, and then it just happened that she was in a really bad relationship. She came and stayed with me for a couple weeks. And we've always kind of been there for each other. Like I've been with her and she's been at my house. And we've always kind of leaned on each other for guidance and support. So she was always my go-to person.
yeah.
It was what it was. We were young and we grew up really together and learned from each other. We had separate lives at that point, but we always came together, and um, it kind of was like that for a long time.
Yeah. And I think now looking back, the reason why we just clicked was because we saw it's kind of like that movie. What was that movie that we watched where it had the multiple personalities and he had the girls captive? Was it Split?
Maybe Split. I
Split.
don't remember what movie it was now.
Yeah, and remember towards the end of it when he actually preserved that girl and he was like, your scars saved you. And it's because the other girls didn't seem like they struggled in life at all, but that one girl had struggles. And so I felt like our relationship, we really clicked because we saw the struggles that we went through in our childhood, because it seemed like we just started just blah, this is my life, this is what happened. And there was a level of security and comfort.
Yeah, it actually, we were really like comfortable with each other and trust each other like right from the get-go. Like
Yeah.
I didn't ever feel like I ever had to hide my feelings or my emotions. And we were both very upfront and honest with each other. We never felt like competitive with each other. It wasn't one person better than the other. We just never were like that. We were always just very upfront and honest with our emotions, and I didn't matter if it hurt your feelings or not. Like, this is what you needed to hear because I loved you enough to tell you. And
Yeah.
so I really felt that from the very beginning of our relationship, that we were really um like just
Transparent.
there and transparent with each other, which that only helped us grow in our relationship later on. But so I think we spent like 10 or 15 years just kind of just being friends and hanging out, and our families would go camping and all of that. And then Heather went through a divorce, which I'll let you talk about that. But and then our story kind of started after she went through a divorce, and then I went through a divorce. It was kind of crazy for a moment, so we kind of lost touch with each other for a few years, and she, was a single mom trying to make it happen. And I hated her boyfriend and still do. Not the boyfriend. Now she's married with a really nice guy that I consider my brother. But when we were younger, she was dating this really toxic guy. And it's funny when you're in a toxic relationship, you can try to hide it through with your other family members and things like that. But the people who get you the most know that you're not happy. Like I seen Heather really struggling with who she was as a person. She didn't look healthy. She wasn't the same person that I noticed before, but I was dealing with my own divorce at the time and going through the same kind of thing. And so for a moment, we kind of were just in survival mode where we didn't really interact with each other a whole lot. Um, I was kind of going off the deep end. I was trying to find myself and who I was, um and I just we just kind of separated there for a minute. Not that we weren't ever friends, but we just had lost touch with each other for a moment in all of that. Um, and we'll get into like the issues that we faced during that time and the struggles that we went through as the podcast goes on. But it ended up being that I had left my husband. I was really struggling because I had nowhere to go. I had 4 kids at home, um, and an ex-husband, or soon-to-be ex-husband, that was kind of going off the deep end, and I had no clue where I was going. And in fact, I was gonna end my life. I was driving up a dirt road and I had nothing left. I'd lost my kids, my home, my family, everything that I was and who I thought I was. It was gone. And I felt like I had nowhere to turn. I had no family members I could go to. It was just a really bad situation. And I remember driving up the dirt road and I had no reception. I'd been up there multiple times. There's no reception. And out of the blue, I get a text message from my friend Heather that says, "Hey, I heard you're going through a divorce. I want you to come stay with me." And I like that was my saving grace. And we'd went back up there later, a couple years later, and I was like, "This is where I turned around. This is where I got your text message." And we had no service. So I definitely believe that it was a miracle from God.
Yeah.
And so I turned around and the next day I moved in. It was just me at first because we were still dealing with my ex and her ex and it was a
Yeah.
hot mess for a second. But yeah, I turned around and um packed up my stuff that night from a family friend that I was staying with for a moment and I moved in. And that was kind of where it all started is at that point.
Yeah. And it got crazy for a minute. Very crazy for a minute.
It was kind of crazy. And it's funny how it worked out because at first it was just me. And then all of a sudden it was all of my kids. And she was being the buffer between my ex and me. And, because he wouldn't let me see my kids. And then, Heather kind of stepped in and she was that buffer between, me and him so that there was an equal ground of communication. And, there was a lot going on with that as far as just how a narcissistic personality relates to any situation. And my ex was very narcissistic, and it took me a long time to understand exactly what that looked like. So all my kids ended up moving in. It was me and Heather and her 2 kids. We're not going to count all the neighbors and friends' kids that ended up at our house, but our house was full. So I had my 4 kids, her 2 kids, and it was me and Heather. Because of my divorce and my ex showing up at my work all the time and causing a scene, I actually lost my job. So I had a job when I moved in with her, and then all of a sudden I didn't have a job.
And here's
So
another miracle because during that time, I ended up, I have 2 kids by 2 different dads, and they stopped paying child support. And then I had to take a 10% pay cut at work. And then Maria lost her job and we were fighting. We're like, we're going to make this work. We're going to figure out how to survive. And that's just what family does. And so there was, I don't even know how financially we made it, but we made it. And we even went out and like fed the homeless and stuff like that when we didn't even know how we were going to eat from day to day, but we did.
we did. That was kind of crazy at that point. We'd grown a lot through there. Heather was very much quiet about her life, It was her little bubble. She didn't want anybody in it.
I didn't
She didn't
trust
want,
people. I like to
no.
protect what I had because my life was so insecure before that I didn't trust people because it was almost like as soon as you let them in, then they hurt you. And so I kept everything a secret. And Maria was not that way. She was very much like, and I remember coming home and we'd have people at our house and she'd have events go, and my anxiety was through the roof because I went through an isolation period right before she moved in. Like I was isolating myself from the world, like I disassociated from everything. And I remember thinking, like, how do you engage? Like, how do you engage with people? How do you make friends? How do you just put yourself out there? Like, I felt like I was just watching life. And Maria, even though she was broken in that phase, she brought life to my house. I just had to learn how to accept the life that she was bringing.
It was kind of crazy. And I think, Heather went through the extreme of isolating herself, and I went the opposite way. I surrounded myself with busyness and people and things like that. So I didn't have time to focus on the issues that I needed to focus on. So I was like out there. I had the barbecues, I had people coming over. We were busy, and I always wanted to go do something. We were took the kids sledding, or we were just busy. And I'm like, I didn't know how to slow down, and you didn't know how to speed up. So we had two separate personalities trying to mesh in a household. And we haven't even got on the topic of being parents to our kids yet, because that's a whole other issue that we had to work out. But we spent a lot of time, like Heather had a lot of people telling her, like, you need to kick them out, like this is too much for you, you don't need to be taking care of them, you can't save the world. And I had nowhere to go, so I, like, the stress of, like, what if she comes home one day and says we can't do this or
Yeah.
whatever. So I was
Maria
like,
was a runner. She was a runner.
yeah.
So as soon as things got tough, she's like, I'm just packing up myself and we're just leaving. We're just leaving. And at that point, I had already like accepted her as my family unit and a responsibility. I'm the fixer. And so I'm like, you're not leaving, you're staying here and you're doing this. And so then it was like we'd have to come to this this calming ground and realize how silly the situation even was. But anytime things would heat up, she would tell her kids to pack their stuff up and everything else. And I'm like, what, she's leaving me? She can't leave me. Like, that whole abandonment issue would like bubble up with me again. And then we just realized, like, we have to fight for this. Like, we're fighting for this because we love each other. And we had to learn what love actually was because we really didn't know what authentic love was. We
We
didn't
had
know what
learned,
family was.
yeah, and we had learned from each other what that looked like, because Heather never allowed me just to pack up and leave and quit when it got tough. And I was running because I didn't want to ruin our friendship by staying or arguing, which we really didn't get into too many
No.
arguments, but it just got tough between, like, how to parent our kids, and what, like, oh my gosh, what happens if she thinks that this, or so
Or
you
the
play in
exes
your
coming
mind.
into the pictures, creating chaos because there's so
Yeah.
much chaos. And then you would feel guilty because your ex was not only creating chaos within your life, but your ex was creating chaos within your friend's life as well when she was going through her own parenting thing. And if anybody out there is dealing with custody issues, like, you don't want anything to rock the boat because you're so afraid. Like, all it takes is one person's perception of the scenario, and then that jeopardizes your ability to parent your children. Like, if this judge sees you unfit, they take your child away. And so we were both kind of on edge there because we had these exes that were just attacking and attacking and attacking and trying to find whatever angle they could get to try to take our kids away from us when they were extremely unhealthy people, unstable people. And so there was a lot more to the picture than just her and I trying to figure out, like, how to trust each other and love each other and learn how to parent together and, deal with our exes together and financially make it. And it was
We had
just,
a lot going on. I'm surprised we even made it, and we were in and out of court. Like, it seemed like every week we were in and out of court. one time my ex even blasted us all over Facebook saying we were running some child porn ring in our basement. We had CPS in our house. And I was like, this is like too much for my friend. Like, I can't hardly bear this alone, and then jeopardize her kids as well. Like, it
He
was
posted
so
me all
hard.
over Craigslist saying that this, if your child frequents this woman's home, she's renting a pedophile ring in her basement. And so I had people on Craigslist calling me saying, hey, I don't know you, but I just want you to know that I seen this on Craigslist, and I just seen this in like the Thrifty Nickel, and like you put me everywhere.
It was horrid. But, you know, finally we had a judge because my ex at the time had visitation. If any parent ever thinks that they do not need a parenting plan, I'm telling you right now to go get one right now. Because if you do not have a parenting plan, there is nothing the law can do if that person decides to take your kids out of state, which is what happened to me. Because I believed he was never going to do that. And so I let my kids go with him for the weekend so that we could negotiate our time and share and all of that. And then he took off, and we didn't know where my kids were for 3 weeks. I didn't know. He had me believing that he was sending my older daughter, who was 15 at the time, off to Alaska so that she could live in some fishing village by herself. And they'd taken pictures to make me believe that she was there. Nobody would tell me nothing. And I think after like 3 weeks,
Yeah.
which there's some funny stories that happen that we'll get into later on too, that kind of go along with all of this. But it took us like 3 weeks to a month before I could figure out where my kids were at and get the courts to bring them back. So when they did, um, it was like, uh, that made me realize that you need a parenting plan. And especially when that officer told me there's nothing that he could do. He could take my kids all the way across the United States and never tell me where they're at. So that
Which
was one
that
thing I
happened
learned.
to a family that I knew. This mom, she came home, she was married, and she came home and her husband and the children were gone. And he moved clear across the United States, and she didn't find him for years. And there was absolutely nothing, nobody could do anything about it. And so when that happened to Maria, we were like, we're going to get your kids, which
Yeah, she was like, it was midnight, and she was like, we're going. I'm like, wait a minute. It's midnight. And I know they're in Montana now because I figured out where they were at. There's no way we're driving to Montana in the middle of October. I'm like, what are we gonna do when we get there? He's gonna shoot us or something for sure. So we ended up, I did some research. I never got an attorney because I didn't have any money. You know, I was poor and not working. And so I had a person at the courthouse who knew the situation, who had been involved with just about everything that happened when I did go to court. And she kind of led me into a direction to get what's called a habeas corpus. So I was able to get that. And they extradited my children from Montana to the courthouse. And I was really scared to go into court and battle against this person, just because I'd seen him before. And when you're in that mindset, especially a narcissistic mindset that that person has put on you, you feel like you don't know what's up. You don't know that you're smart enough
no
to figure these
reality.
things out. You don't know that you have the ability that they say that you don't in
When
order to
Maria
get
first
it.
moved in, when Maria first moved in, she was under the impression that because our exes kind of just had just like a more chauvinistic old school mentality where women were to serve men. Like that was just kind of their demeanor. And so when she finally left him, she was under the impression that since she was the one leaving, she had no rights to her children. And so she's like, well, I guess I just gave up. She goes, but she couldn't take it anymore, right? She couldn't deal with like the constant gaslighting and just manipulation going on. It was making her lose herself. And so when she originally moved in with me, she was under the impression that since she was deciding to leave the marriage because he led her to believe this, that means like she couldn't have her kids. And that was something that he kept using against her, and they make you think, like, they distort your reality. And so when she was finally able to get the children back, like, it was a huge victory, like, for her to realize, like, wait a minute, like, everything that he's ever told me is not even real. It was like her wake up call, which I remember having my wake up call of, like, this was abuse. Like, Maria made me realize, like, mine was abusive. And that was her wake up call, that, like, everything that comes out of his mouth is pure manipulation and distorted.
And it took a long time to get away from that mentality. And I had to learn a new mindset and a new way of thinking that I had never had. Like, I got married to this guy when I was 17 years old. I was very young. And it started at very young age, a little bit at a time. And you lose track of what reality really is. And that's why they want to keep you in this little bubble so that they can control, manipulate your mindset. Because if you are around people who are not like that and can see that this is the situation that you're in, and they start talking to you, then that person loses control of the situation and they push even harder, which is what happened in our situation. So as soon as I got my kids back and we moved in, that's when a lot of the other stuff started coming. That's when he was trying to take me to court, and they would drive by our house, and they would have his friends drive by our house, and we just kept saying, this, we're just going to keep going on, we're just going to keep moving, we're going to keep going forward. And we tried to make it as fun as possible for the kids so that they didn't have the stresses to deal with that we were dealing with. So we never talked about our court cases, we never talked about certain things with them. We tried to keep them as sheltered as possible from it. I never talked, I tried not to ever talk negative about their dad in front of them, because they have the right to love their dad. That was probably the hardest thing for me to realize and to not do, is because I had an issue with them that was still their dad. And
Yeah.
Heather actually told me that, like, you might not like this person and you might have issues with that person, but you don't want your kids to see that they still love their dad. They don't understand what's going on. And he was a good dad. I'm not saying that he wasn't a good dad. He, in his way, he loves his children. And so I had
He
a
just
really hard
wasn't
time
healthy in that moment.
in that moment. He was
He
not.
wasn't healthy. Yeah.
And so it took a little bit. I'm glad that when we went to court, the judge did say, and obviously that you are having a hard time with this, and because you can't leave the kids out of it, and this is talking to my ex, he wanted supervised visitations. And that helped a great deal. That allowed my children to heal a little bit. That allowed me to heal some. And I remember, like, arguing because he would message me and I would just get in this argument like I'm going to win. And I would sit there and argue back and argue back and argue back. And then pretty soon I realized that he still has the power of manipulating me,
Yeah.
because now I have to argue with him, and now I can. And now I can tell him everything that I want to. And deep down, I had to realize, no matter what I said to him, no matter how angry I got, no matter how sad I was, he was never going to give me what I wanted, which was understanding. I wanted him to understand what he had done, and he was never going to do
Ownership.
it. There
Mm-hmm.
was no ownership there. And
Mm-hmm.
once I realized that he's never going to sit back and analyze any fault of his own in anything. He's always going to push that on me, that it was my fault. I'm the one that left. I'm the one that caused all of this. I'm the one that rocked the boat. So once I realized that I'm never going to get that apology, I'm never going to get that understanding, he's never going to see it from my point of view, I just stopped arguing with him. I
Yeah.
realized at that moment that I could just not answer, or I could just hang up. And so after a while, it took, like, I don't know what, 10 years.
Yeah.
It was
It
a
does.
long
And
time.
even now, they tend sometimes to get under your skin, and your first response is to defend yourself and attack back, because it's kind of like that whole boundary line, like, oh, they're crossing over this boundary, so I'm going to attack back. And then you have to step back and be like, this is just, it's wasting my time, and it is changing it is power and control, because it changes how you feel about yourself in that moment. You get angry in that moment, you get frustrated in that moment, and then you go from being like happy and joyful to being pissed off. And so, I mean, it even years later, it still tends to like trigger you. You just have to remember it. I
Yeah,
still
you just
go
have to
through it.
walk away, right?
Yeah.
And mine isn't so bad now, but I know during like visitation when I do get my son and things like that, like I have to communicate with them and realize that, you know, I he still needs to know about what his kids are doing and just making sure that I understand what the line is as far as him just being a parent needing to know and him trying to dictate our life even now. So I know now where I'm at in life and I know how to deal with it, and I don't let it bother me as much as it used to anymore.
Mhm.
So and that's good, but in the beginning, we definitely had some hardship to go on. And it was funny because I remember I think it was like the second or third night all the kids were there. And Heather's kids are crazy. I'm just saying that. They
They're
were
hyper.
hyper insane crazy. Like my kids were all sitting and from the household that we were at, like they could not be noisy. They were, if they wanted to play, they had to go outside or in their room. They weren't allowed to jump on the furniture and really just be kids now that I look back, you know. And so when we got to Heather's, we're all sitting in the living room on the couch. And then all of a sudden, here comes Heather's daughter flying over the couch and her son flying after her, like jumping over the couch. And my kids, I remember sitting there looking at them and they were like, oh my God, like, are they going to get mad? What is going on? And I realized at that moment that my kids didn't know how to be kids and they
Hmm.
didn't know how to have fun.
Yep.
And they were just sitting there. And so Heather and I got this idea. It was mainly Heather's idea because I'm like, are you kidding me? This is chaos. Um, that we all went and got them Nerf guns. Like everyone got a Nerf gun, a couple of them. We had machine guns because we were the
Uh,
mom. We just opened up, we gave all the kids these gifts. We opened up all of
which
them
her
and
kids weren't used to getting gifts and like they would get gifts, but they weren't toys. Because her ex was very militant and everything had to have a purpose. And so when we gave them these toys, and especially toy guns, you know, which whatever, some people might have an issue with it, it was fun for us. So when they first got the gifts, they were kind of like, well, what do I do with this? Like it was almost like they didn't know how to engage until we started shooting them.
so we took off running through the house and we had this 4-story house. It was a huge house and it had railings. And I remember my son was laughing so hard and he shot me right in the eye and he thought it was the funniest thing. And we were picking up those Nerf bullets for months, even when
Even
we moved
after we
out.
moved, when we were moving out, remember we were still finding Nerf bullets.
Nerf bullets everywhere. But I remember like then the kids knew that they could have fun and they kind of all went crazy for a moment. But it was fun for them because they'd never been able to do that before. And not that they didn't have good times, but they was just this different mindset for them than there was when with Heather's kids. And so that was like a huge learning curve to me. Like Heather definitely like I loved my kids and I did love them, but I was so focused on raising like people that needed to be productive members of society that I forgot that at that moment they were still little. They didn't need to be productive members of society at 5 years old. They needed to be kids at 5 years old. And so Heather really taught me how to let them be kids. Like
Mhm.
they will make mistakes. They will tear up the living room. They will leave toys laying around. They will not do the dishes. And that's okay because they're just kids.
Yeah,
And we have the rest of our lives to have a clean house. And
yeah.
so that was really fun. But we all got together when those times did happen and picked up, and it took like 5 minutes and it
Oh
was all
yeah, it
back
was
to normal.
amazing. And Maria taught me because I served my kids constantly, right? We had an oppressive life before because my relationships were toxic, you know, they're so toxic. And I think in a way, when I first became single, it was almost like I felt bad that I took my kids as dad away from them. And so then I just wanted to shut. And then that situation was very oppressive. And so I just wanted to shower them with love, to let them know, like, I love you, I love you, I love you. And I would serve them like constantly. And here I was working, you know, 2 jobs and going to college at times, like, and I was so tired, and I would go to the kitchen and get them something to drink because they were thirsty, and I would go get them their plate. And Maria, when she moved in, she's like, wait a minute, like, they are old enough to go get their own drink, and they're old enough to go make their own plate. So she had to teach me how to make them accountable, because I was enabling my children. I was enabling them, and she was like very militant with hers. And so it was a well balanced, like, so I taught her how to love them and just like really embrace who they are. And then she taught me, like, you have to have some type of expectation, otherwise they'll continue to go through life like not knowing what to work for. Like, they won't be able to provide for themselves or work for themselves or do anything else, and they will be entitled people.
Yeah. So I have somebody that showed up at my house, so I'll have to cut this short, but um I don't know what they want. Anyhow, so we'll finish up next week and
Yeah.
kind of discuss some more, but it was great. And we look forward to sharing our life with you and all of the things that we've learned throughout the way. Some funny stories. We'll have some great stories. I think they're great. We laugh about it all the time. Um, Next week. So make sure you join in.
All right. Awesome. Bye.
Bye.